They always say every grand house hides its secrets. That was true for the DeWitt Mansion, a vast estate that watched over the edges of Boston, Massachusetts, like a silent judge. Tall white columns held up the front porch, rising higher than any tree on the property. And a pair of wrought iron gates closed out the world, promising safety and privacy. But inside, the silence was not the comforting kind. It was cold and heavy, the sort of silence that pressed on your chest and filled the endless, echoing hallways with the weight of secrets nobody was allowed to speak. I was one of those secrets. My name is Adeline DeWitt, though for years I wondered if it ever truly belonged to me. My father, Senator Henry DeWitt, liked his life organized the way he liked his office. Sharp lines, shining surfaces, nothing out of place. He collected art-expensive paintings and rare sculptures from Europe that cost more than most people's houses in dollars or pounds. To him, everything was an asset or a liability to be displayed or hidden away. My twin brother Victor was his masterpiece. The son he paraded in photographs, the heir he introduced to wealthy friends from London and New York. Me? I was the shadow in the family portrait, my mother's little secret. I heard her whisper it when she thought I was asleep. My sweet girl, you're the secret in my heart. It was never a burden to her, but to my father it was a flaw he couldn't bear. Growing up in that house, I learned to move quietly, to slip between rooms without leaving a trace. My childhood memories are filled with stolen moments, listening to Victor play the piano in the West Wing, hiding in the library with a stack of novels, watching the world outside through thick glass that never opened. My father's footsteps always sounded different when he was angry. He would stride past my room, never pausing, always looking ahead as if I weren't there. I think that was his greatest talent, erasing the things he didn't want to see. It wasn't until I was 17 that I truly understood what it meant to be erased. It started with a rumor, one of those whispers that slithered through the halls of power, poisoning everything it touched. I won't speak about the scandal, not even now. All I can say is that it threatened my father's career, his spotless reputation. The illusion of control he had built up dollar by dollar, favor by favor. There were phone calls at all hours. My mother's face was drawn and pale. Victor, confused and angry, was sent away to stay with family in Connecticut. My father's office doors stayed shut for days. When the solution came, it was as sudden and brutal as a thunderstorm. My father believed in control, in handling things quietly and efficiently. He called me to his study late one night. The curtains were drawn, the room thick with cigar smoke and the scent of old paper. He didn't look at me. He just stared at a document on his desk, the light catching the gray in his hair. "Adeline," he said, his voice flat, "sometimes the cost of survival is sacrifice." Those words should have warned me, but I was young. I didn't understand then that for some people, family is only ever a matter of convenience. The night of the fire was bitterly cold. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes, muffling the sounds outside. I remember lying in bed, my thoughts tangled and restless. I heard a noise, maybe a footstep, maybe just the old house settling. Then the sharp scent of smoke. At first, I thought it was just the fireplace downstairs. But the smell grew thicker, and when I opened my door, black smoke poured into my room, stinging my eyes and burning my throat. Panic clawed at me. I dropped to the floor, crawling along the carpet as the heat grew unbearable. Flames flickered at the end of the hall, eating up everything in their path. I remember the sound of wood cracking, the distant wail of sirens, my own heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. My hands found the window latch, but the glass wouldn't budge. For a second, I thought about giving up, letting the fire swallow me whole, because wasn't that what my father wanted? But something in me rebelled, a voice, fierce and angry, refusing to be silenced. I smashed the window with a lamp, shards of glass cutting my hands. Cold air rushed in, mixing with the choking smoke. I climbed onto the ledge and let myself fall, rolling into a snowbank below. The world spun, red and white and black, and then I was crawling through the snow, coughing, half blind. I could hear the shouts of firefighters in the distance, but I knew I couldn't let them see me. If I were found, my father would finish what he started. I made it to the edge of the property, hiding in the shadows of the trees. I watched as the east wing burned, flames licking the sky, smoke billowing high above Boston. The fire was hungry and merciless, devouring everything in its path. The mansion survived, but my old life did not. My father's story was perfect, as always. He gave interviews, tears shining in his eyes, speaking about the tragedy of losing a daughter so young. There was a funeral, a closed casket, of course, because there was nothing to bury. My mother wept, but I never knew if her grief was for me or for the life she could never have. Victor returned, quiet and changed, and my father wrapped his arm around him for the cameras. But I was alive, hidden and shivering in the Boston winter, stripped of everything I had ever known. My world had vanished, swallowed by fire and lies, and I had become a ghost in my own story. That night, in the ruins of my childhood, I made myself a promise: I would never be erased again. If the world above was cold, the world beneath was colder still, but it was alive in a way I had never known before. After the fire, I wandered the snowy back streets of Boston. My hands cut, my mind numb, my heart clinging to survival out of sheer spite. I ate from dumpsters behind expensive restaurants and shivered in alleyways, hidden under the shadows of glass towers. I could have disappeared forever, a lost girl no one would ever look for, if not for the night Layla found me. She appeared from nowhere, stepping out of the mist near the old Boston Common, where the street lamps burned a golden haze through the darkness. I remember she wore a black coat patched at the elbows, and her hair fiery red, wild and curling tumbled out beneath a battered cap. She moved with a strange feline grace, like someone who knew every secret path in the city. At first, I thought she was just another stranger passing by, but she stopped and looked right at me, her green eyes sharp as cut glass. "You don't belong up here," she said softly, as if she could see through my stolen coat and the dirt on my face. "Come with me if you want to live past dawn." I don't know why I trusted her. Maybe I was too tired to run. Maybe I heard something in her voice, a promise of belonging, or at least survival. I followed her narrow side streets and hidden alleys, down stairways most people never noticed. At a rusty metal grate behind an abandoned church, she pulled a ring of keys from her pocket and unlocked the city itself. Beneath Boston is a labyrinth, forgotten subway tunnels, storm drains, and ancient brick catacombs built by hands long vanished. Down there, the world was lit by flickering bulbs strung on wires and the glow of screens from rooms carved into stone. The air tasted of dust and rust and secrets. The walls were painted with strange symbols, half warnings and half invitations. Here, the world of my father and his perfect mansion felt as far away as the moon. Lila was more than a guide. She was the queen of this underworld. People called her a witch, and she did little to correct them. Some said she could speak to the dead, or curse you with a word, or read your fate in the ashes of a burnt letter. What I know is this: Leela could spot a liar by the way they held their hands. She could tell who was trustworthy, who was desperate, and who would sell you out for a bottle of gin. Under her rule, the catacombs became a sanctuary for outcasts, runaways, and those who wanted to disappear. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who understood what it meant to lose everything. There was Cole, a thief from Chicago with quick fingers and quicker jokes. Petra, a hacker from Berlin who could break into any bank account on the planet. And Marcus, a former banker from London, now laundering money for a living and never missing his tea at midnight. There were others, two quiet girls with haunted eyes, men who spoke in code, and children who never answered to their real names. Leela taught me how to survive. She showed me how to blend in, how to watch the world without being seen, how to take what I needed without leaving a trace. I learned to pick pockets on the crowded trains, to read the language of locked doors and security systems. Petra showed me how to slip into digital networks, to move money invisibly from accounts in New York and Paris into pockets that would never be traced. Cole taught me how to run a con, how to talk my way past suspicion, and how to keep my head when everything went wrong. But most of all, I learned the value of secrets. Down there, money meant nothing unless you knew how to use it. Power was measured not in dollars or pounds, but in the strength of your alliances and the weight of what you knew. I kept my secret close, never telling anyone who I had been or the true reason I ended up in the catacombs. Even Leela didn't impress me, though I suspect she knew. She saw the anger in my eyes and the way my hands shook when someone mentioned the world above. We called ourselves the Midnight Order. We were a family of the unwanted, the unacknowledged, and the unbroken. We helped each other in ways the world would never understand. If someone was hungry, we fed them. If someone was in trouble, we found a way out. If someone needed revenge, we made it happen. Over time, I became one of them. More than that, I became useful. With Layla's guidance, I began to build something new for myself. My old life had been a gilded cage. This one was forged in freedom and grit. I started by smuggling stolen artwork and rare technology between America and Europe, moving them through underground channels no police could follow. Marcus handled the money. He taught me how to launder cash through dummy companies and offshore accounts, until dollars and pounds became weapons, not just currency. Petra gave me the tools to erase and rewrite my own identity, inventing a new self, Adele Laurent, a name that belonged to no one but me. Adele became a rumor, then a legend. People in London's back alleys and Parisian speakeasies spoke my name with a mix of awe and fear. The Midnight Order grew with every risk we took, every secret we stole, every fortune we made. I watched as men like my father, rich, powerful, and untouchable, lost sleep over invisible enemies. The world above had no idea what was coming. All this time, my father's face haunted my dreams. I saw him at his desk, counting his dollars, believing he controlled every outcome. He had tried to erase me, but he only made me stronger. Every day, I trained myself to become the thing he feared most, the secret that would destroy him. 5 years passed, and the name Adeline DeWitt vanished from the world. In her place, Adele Laurent built a black market empire that stretched from Boston to London, from Paris to the shadowy corners of New York. I became a ghost unseen, unstoppable, and unforgettable. And for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. The world above had always felt so far away, like a city behind glass, close enough to see, but forever out of reach. In the catacombs, I became someone else, but the streets above never stopped calling to me, a siren song of unfinished business. Eventually, it was not enough to simply survive. I wanted to be felt. I wanted those who had built their palaces on other people's pain to know what it meant to lose. I wanted them to know that the ghost they'd made could haunt them forever. It began with whispers. At first, I moved carefully, testing the boundaries, learning how far the reach of the Midnight Order extended. We were no longer just a network of survivors. We were architects of chaos. With Leela's magic and Petra's machines, we became invisible and unstoppable, our hands in a dozen cities at once. I listened to the news above while we sat huddled around old radios in the tunnels, reports of missing money, a banker's secret affair exposed, a senator's daughter caught in a scandal not of her own making. But it wasn't until I saw my father's face on the evening news, lines deeper, eyes darker, that I knew the game had truly begun. Senators lost their elections because of rumors I leaked. Truths twisted with lies so skillfully that not even the sharpest mind could untangle them. Billionaires, men who treated dollars and pounds like chess pieces, watched their fortunes evaporate overnight. A single tip from me would send a rival company's stock tumbling, or a hidden investment revealed would lead to an inquiry that ate through an empire in weeks. My father's closest friends woke up to see their names splashed across headlines, affairs they thought forgotten, bribes carefully hidden, debts that could no longer be denied. The world watched, hungry for scandal, never guessing that the architect of all this destruction was a dead girl with a new name. Technology was my greatest weapon. Petra and I developed tools that felt like science fiction, cameras the size of a pinhead, hidden in the frames of paintings that hung in the offices of the powerful, microphones disguised as cufflinks, encrypted phones that couldn't be traced, with messages that vanished as soon as they were read. We tapped into bank accounts, intercepted emails, and slipped through the cracks of firewalls that were supposed to be impenetrable. But sometimes, the old ways were more powerful than anything digital. Layla taught me her secrets, the old magic, how to slip into dreams and whisper just enough doubt to make a man turn against his allies, how to curse a name so that misfortune followed wherever they went. Some of it was sleight of hand, some of it unexplainable, but the results were the same: terror in the eyes of the men who believed themselves untouchable. I became a rumor, a story told in hushed tones in boardrooms and back alleys from Manhattan to Mayfair. "Have you heard of Adele Laurent?" They would ask, and sometimes the answer was just a nervous laugh, a change of subject. Nobody could agree on what I looked like. Some said I was old, others that I was just a girl. Some said I worked for the Russians or the French, or that I was a myth invented to explain their failures. I made sure that every time someone tried to pin me down, they found nothing but shadows. My father, Senator DeWitt, felt the pressure mounting. His enemies closed in on him, emboldened by his stumbles. Private detectives flew in from London and New York, men who charged $10,000 a week to dig into ghosts. They followed leads across America and Europe, turning up nothing but a handful of forged passports and bank accounts that dissolved into thin air. My father's phone was tapped, his house swept for bugs so many times it was a wonder the walls still stood. He accused his staff, then his friends, even his son Victor, who grew more distant every day. Paranoia ate away at him like acid. But my revenge was never just about me. Each night, sitting by the glow of a dozen screens deep in the catacombs, I thought about all the people like me, daughters erased, sons silenced, families broken for the sake of appearances. The faces of the order haunted me: Cole, who'd run from a violent stepfather; Petra, exiled by a corrupt employer; Lila herself, whose mother had been branded a witch and driven from her village in Ireland with nothing but a bag of coins. We were the ghosts made by men like my father, and now we moved in the dark, changing the world one secret at a time. Sometimes I wondered if I was becoming like him. Power is a seductive thing, and I felt it running through my veins every time a news alert flashed with another destroyed reputation. But then I'd remember the way I'd felt that night in the snow cold, afraid, erased. I told myself there was a difference. My war was for justice, not for power. Still, the lines blurred, and I understood why my father had always seemed so afraid of shadows. Once you become the thing you fear, it never really lets you go. I never let myself forget my original promise. Each time I sent another secret out into the world, another whispered warning to a corrupt official, or a threat to a banker who preyed on the poor, I remembered the fire. I remembered the feeling of being erased and resolved to never let it happen again, not to me, not to anyone I could save. Sometimes, late at night, I would walk the streets of Boston, anonymous in the city that had once tried to bury me. I would see the lights of the mansion on the hill, cold and perfect, and know that soon it would fall. And yet, I found myself longing for something more. The Midnight Order had become my family, but even they could not heal the wound left by my old life. Victor reached out to me once, sending an anonymous message to one of my accounts. "Are you alive?" was all he wrote. I deleted it without replying, afraid of what might happen if he knew the truth. Perhaps in another world, we could have been allies. But I was not finished yet. My father's world was shrinking, and mine was growing. Every day, another piece of his empire crumbled. Another of his allies turned into a traitor by my careful hand. The world above still did not know my face, but they felt my presence in every shadow. And in their nightmares, I whispered promises that the reckoning was just beginning. There comes a moment in every ghost story when the past and the present collide, when everything that's been hidden in the shadows finally steps into the light. For me, that moment was a masquerade ball in Manhattan, my father's last desperate grasp at glory, his grand campaign launch. The city glittered that night, the skyline ablaze with 1,000 electric promises. I watched the limousines slide down Fifth Avenue, their tinted windows gleaming. As the powerful and the privileged streamed into the Grand Marquette Hotel, inside, the ballroom was another world. Crystal chandeliers threw prisms of light over gold-trimmed columns and marble floors. And everywhere there were masks, velvet, feathered, gleaming with jewels, hiding secrets behind painted smiles. Waiters moved like ghosts with silver trays. Glasses chimed with champagne, laughter rising above the orchestra. It was a kingdom of pretense, a palace built on illusion. I watched from the balcony, unseen, remembering all the years I had been forced to live as someone else's secret. My dress was midnight black, velvet that caught the light and shimmered as I moved. I'd spent $5,000 on it, blood money from the empire I'd built below ground, the empire my father thought he'd destroyed. The mask I wore hid only my face. My purpose was sharper than ever. Around me, the whispers began as soon as I entered. Some thought I was just another heiress from Europe, a mysterious guest from London or Paris. No one suspected that beneath the mask was the girl they thought dead. The daughter erased by a lie. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease. I passed men who had signed away their souls for a seat at my father's table. I saw women who had smiled at my mother's funeral, their eyes dry, already plotting their next alliance. My brother Victor was there too, looking older, burdened. I wondered if he'd recognize me. I wondered if he remembered the nights we'd played hide-and-seek in the gardens, before ambition and betrayal tore our family apart. As midnight neared, the orchestra fell silent, and all eyes turned to the grand staircase. My father appeared, every inch the senator, his tuxedo tailored, his mask a cold, impassive silver. The room erupted in applause. He raised a hand, waiting for quiet, his smile polished for the cameras. In that moment, I saw the years that had etched lines into his face, the strain in his posture, the fear in his eyes, a man who knew his kingdom was crumbling. I waited until he began to speak. His voice carried across the room, full of promises and empty hope, the kind of speech I'd heard 1,000 times as a child hidden behind a half-closed door. "We are gathered tonight," he said, "to celebrate a new era. Together we have weathered storms and overcome every obstacle. Our future has never been brighter." That was my cue. I slipped away from the balcony, gliding down the stairs, the black velvet dress whispering with every step. The crowd parted as I moved, drawn by some instinct deeper than sight. I stopped at the center of the room, facing my father, and slowly reached up to remove my mask. The silence was absolute. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. My father's face went ashen. His eyes, always cold and unreadable, widened in horror. Victor staggered back as if struck. The crowd looked from me to the senator, confusion turning to dread. And then, one voice, sharp and trembling, "Adeline DeWitt, but she's dead." I let them stare. I let the truth sink in. Then I spoke, not with the hesitation of a lost daughter, but with the authority of a woman who had survived the fire and the lie. "No," I said, my voice echoing off marble and gold. "I am very much alive. And so are the secrets this man has buried." Screens lit up across the ballroom. Petra's work, streaming evidence for every eye to see. Bank transfers, bribes. The man who had set the fire had his confession captured on video. Emails between my father and his allies, arranging to erase me for good. Photographs of my battered hands, police reports rewritten, checks signed in hurried, angry ink. The truth unfolded, line by line, image by image, and the crowd recoiled as if the ballroom itself had caught fire. I told my story. I named names. I revealed the empire my father had built, every crooked deal, every innocent life destroyed for profit, every mask that had smiled while another was burned. I named those who had helped him, those who had looked the other way, those who had taken their share of the blood money. There was no hiding now. The masquerade was over. My father tried to speak, but his voice broke.
He reached for Victor, who turned away in disgust.
His allies edged toward the exits, their fortunes collapsing with every revelation. The room was chaos, shouts, gasps, the clicking of 1,000 phones as the story went viral in real time. The ghosts I had gathered, the people whose lives had been ruined, whose voices had been silenced, were there with me, living and dead. I saw Leela at the back, her eyes shining with fierce pride. In less than an hour, my father's world collapsed. The empire he had spent a lifetime building, worth millions of dollars, became worthless in a storm of scandal. Every carefully constructed lie crumbled beneath the weight of the truth. His friends abandoned him, the press swarmed, and for the first time in his life he had no control, no escape. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath. Justice was not vengeance, and I had done what I came to do. I walked out of the ballroom, through the swirling snow, past the flashing cameras and the cries for comment. I left the mask behind. I left Adeline DeWitt behind too. On the streets of New York, I felt the cold on my skin, sharp and real. I was no longer a secret, no longer a ghost. I was simply myself, alive, unbroken and free. As I disappeared into the night, I knew that the world had changed forever. And so had I.